You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Liam.
I'm Owen.
And this week we're here to renew or continue our look at the Enemy Within campaign. This time we're on to book 3, halfway through the series, and we're talking about Power Behind the Throne and its companion book. So if you haven't listened to our first two, or if you have intentions of playing this yourself, you might want to stop listening and come back in next week, because this will be highly spoilerific.
I mean, it's the old Irish advice will be, I wouldn't start from here. This is not the one to start with. Listen to our other two first, which will cover the first two books. And this is interesting because this is the final one in the series that was really published before. The next two after this are complete fresh territory, haven't been published at all. And this one comes from an interesting pedigree. As far as a book, like the origin of this book, if you look at this, is its original a guy called Carl Sargent, who was a interesting character who basically wrote this as kind of sort of nearly an AD&D adventure, and this got then repurposed then, and they kind of reformatted and said, no, we can make this works for Wolfrup. And they put together an adventure. In a lot of ways, this one was way ahead of its time. In the same way that Death in the Reich is this amazing introduction to sort of unintentionally, despite being theoretically an incredible railroad, often spiraled into a sandbox campaign about river trading. This one is an intrigue-based city adventure where the players are given very little guidance, apart from what the GM can kind of string together themselves, and told, yep, there's an event on, go to the events.
Yep. This person seems important. You might want to go talk to them.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, that's largely where all of the information's coming from.
Yes.
It's entirely based on clues you drop for people. I guess.
I would actually describe this one in some ways a bit like a murder mystery. There's no murder, but it's a bit like a murder mystery. You've got to figure out who everybody is, who is their relationship to everybody. You are kind of Hercule Poirot showing up at a party and going, and who is this? And what is your relationship with the Countess? You know, you're going around asking those, trying to find a way to ask those questions, which is interesting because sometimes players are, you know, noble people or, you know, judicial champions or, you know, other notable personages, and sometimes they're rat catchers going, so how am I going to...
What's in it for me?
Yeah, well, how do I ask a princess? Hey, princess, you know?
Get away from me, you peasant.
Yeah, oh no.
You smell foul.
So, very interesting, different concept for adventure, because back then there wasn't, you didn't have many. It was dungeon crawling for the most part, and then this was kind of one of the early city adventures.
Well,
and, yeah,
it's particularly interesting as you mentioned it really with the Ratcatcher going up to talk, but the fact that Wolfrup does have a clear kind of strata for what your social class is. You know, you have your gold, silver, and brass, and so you have people who would literally be in the eyes of people who are in the higher echelons like absolute scum, and they wouldn't talk to them. So to throw that into this kind of mechanism of game into that setting, it can give inherent problems in itself. I mean, some GMs just don't want to deal with it and just kind of ignore the social status thing. And other times, yeah, okay, you can bring it up and just throw in a -10 or a +10. But it's kind of, it brings in an extra degree of challenge, I suppose. Because most of the time when you're dealing with most settings, it's just you rock up and talk to somebody.
Yeah. It's a fascinating little GM player mini game that if a GM or player decides to push it, particularly a player decides to push it, what happens?
Yeah. Do the guards drag them off and give them a solid beating?
Of the Dwarven Ironbreaker versus, at this stage, 37 guards, and he's killed 50 of them.
Yeah.
And you're like, What?
Where did it all go wrong? He was refused service at the buffet.
What are you doing? Well, I'm looking at the rules for making tougher guards because, they aren't currently taking him down, and I need to, at that point, does the GM just go, guys...
If all else fails, in Middenheim, there is a chapter house for both the Knights Panther and the Order of the White Wolf, who can both come down and kick the snot out of your Ironbreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to sometimes... It's a fascinating little thing where you could have a player who decides to push back against it, and players are often disproportionately a bit powerful, and that... It's an interesting game of chicken you can end up playing.
Yeah.
Or, okay, is this session now about me fighting your character? Because you're insisting on doing stuff that, everyone here is going, yoik, leave. Nope.
Well, I think, I think by and large my group are good, but they tended to kind of focus on, the brass folks would talk to the help, and the gold folks would talk to the nobles, and that works very well. And it was rare that people would be going up a bit out of class, and by and large for this module, I didn't push that heavily on it, except for say if someone had character traits of dislikes peasants, dislikes nobles, then specifically they would be have a certain degree of animosity to someone of that class coming up and talking to them. Yeah.
Now we've been talking about class a lot because class runs through this one. It's about you're trying to push into the upper echelons of society, and one of the things you kind of have to make explicit to the players at some point. It's questionable whether you should do this right from the start or right from the end. This is about a conspiracy that is happening in the Graf's inner circle, and you have to figure out who has influence over the Graf and reverse the course of this to try and achieve your objective and thing. And it's a difficult one because how quickly do you tip your hand on that one? I kind of got into it with my players about 2/3 of the way in. I said, guys, this is what you need to do. I didn't provide explicit direction, but they were kind of poking around and starting to figure stuff out, and they'd gotten some people on side just by talking with them and figuring out what was going on. And I said, this is the meta game of this thing. This is what it's about. I think you do need to be explicit eventually. Go, this is what the game is, guys.
Yeah, I think my party kind of sniffed onto it and wanted to investigate it when, one of the first encounters that happens after the party get to Middenheim, because that's where previously you were in Reichland, and now you're moving up to Middenland, and the capital of that is Middenheim. One of the first things that happens when they get into the city is they get ambushed by the Purple Hand, who are the cult from the previous book that they've had run-ins with. They captured one of the cultists alive, and they, of course, tortured him because that's what they do. My party may not be particularly. They don't believe the Geneva Convention. But being a low-level cultist, they don't know anything. They know next to nothing. But all they know is that they've been told to talk up the taxes. So that gets the party going, right? Well, if this cult are really in favour of these taxes, something funny's going on. And that was the hook that really dragged my players in.
Yeah. And that worked for mine as well, that they looked at that and went, oh, because I've run this twice, and they go, oh, that's, these guys are, because this is part of the continuing plot thread of the Purple Hand. Initially, they were basically demanding stuff of the players of Castor Liberum.
Give us that inheritance.
Give us that inheritance, Castor. Or in my case, Castell. Castell, give us your money. She's like, I do not have any. I do not know what you were talking about. Yes, I have hundreds of gold Carls from other endeavors, but there's nothing to do with the thing. I'm
mostly from dead cultists, really.
and an extended trading section of the Reich. She was quite wealthy. Well, the party were wealthy.
Yeah.
But she had access to quite a lot of funds because she was Castell is she was a cultist for Ronald, so she has been accumulating.
I see, very legitimate business dealings then.
Oh no criminal activity. It was interesting. She was getting a cut at some point for some deals. People were like, "Oh, there, sister, there you go," and she's like, "Oh yeah, I did help set that up. I guess it makes sense. I get a cut.
Yeah,
I should probably give some of this to Ronald, but I'm anti-Ronald." So yeah, So what happens is you show up and the cult are at it again.
Yeah.
But you drub them up fairly quickly. And then the players are in this situation where there's this carnival with a massive range of stuff going on.
There is, and it's one thing, like I was glad when the books turned up, but it's quite nicely formatted in that you have this carnival on, and there's a whole pile of events on.
Yeah.
And whereas normally, if you wanted to encounter a bunch of NPCs, first of all, you have to figure out who the NPCs are. And then you have to go knocking on their houses or arranging meetings or doing any of this kind of stuff. But actually what you have is, with this timetable of events, you're going to have a list of notable people who will be at those events. And as a GM, it can be a little bit challenging to keep track of what events are on where and who's on where, but the resources in the book are actually quite good for doing it. And as well, even when you're trying to quickly refresh, what was this character's deal again? What did I think of these other people? That they're summarized quite nicely. Each of the kind of important characters has 1-2 pages on them, and it's literally like, oh, well, what did I think of the wizards? Flick, 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 flick. Oh, okay, yeah, they don't really deal with them. So
absolutely,
it's a challenge to keep all that in your head, but the resources are really there to help you out. And actually, that's one thing I did enjoy with getting the free PDF as well, because you're able to. I could write on my books.
Yeah,
but I don't like doing it.
No.
So to be able to just like scribble in notes and stuff was nice to be able to do that with the printouts.
What I would say, they do a very good job of summarizing the NPCs, which are the big hook of the event. The thing that I think is in some cases a little bit undercooked is the events. I'm running out. I should really expand some more of the events. Some of the events are very perfunctory.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing really important, because it's all about talking to the NPCs. But the players occasionally want something a bit more to do. Because sometimes you go to the event and you're like, yeah, the opera's on. What do you want me to tell you? It's an opera. You know?
There's an opera and they've thrown in a couple of lines to make a joke about, an existing opera, which if you like opera you'll get, and if you don't, you probably won't.
I will say, there are a couple of 80s references in this book.
They've continued the streak of 80s references, obscure ones, the new romantic.
One of them I was like, I do not understand this reference. Yep. I am sorry, I have no clue. And I looked it up. It was to do with, I think it was the one of the elven dancing or the elven acrobatics. And it was overseen by somebody, and I go, I know this is a reference. I do not know what the reference is. And I went trawling through the internet, and I eventually figured it out. Yeah, and it was the Elven Gymnasts, and it's this famous 1980s Olympic gymnast from Hungary, I think, is the reference for what it is. Like, and if you knew that, it's obvious. And like, I didn't know that because, strangely, I wasn't much of a fan of the Olympics in the early 1980s because I was 2.
Yeah. It's if they took all that out, I'm sure there'd be an older cohort to be grumbling about it being there. And some part of it is gaming history, you know.
But there are jokes in here that are literally, this is a joke from 20 years before you were born. Hope that isn't a problem.
Some stuff is timeless, like referring to the Albionite writer Wilhelm Pikewaver.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, but yeah, there's a whole bunch of jokes in here about 80s glam rock music and like new romantics, which are I got, but let's face it, it's very, very, very dated.
And I don't mind it, but it is just this thing of you're going.
The Elven League.
GM will be spinning at this, going, What is this? I don't get this. This is weird. It's the Elven It's neo-romantic music.
Yeah.
It's the new romantics. It's Adam and the Ants.
Yep.
It's Dandy Highwaymen. Okay, guys, you got to go read a Wikipedia article at this point.
Look, maybe there's a resource out there where somebody's done a updated Power Behind the Throne. Pop references.
You can kind of see the new romantics music style, sort of, in Wolfrup. If you decide to put in like rap in Wolfrup, I think it would go to strange places pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it can depend on the type of rap as well, because some rap is like, look at me, I got giant piles of money, am I great? And other it's like, look, I'm from the streets, it's rough, and, the man's coming down on us as well. Which, in itself, okay, you could definitely tie into a lot of Woofer, but given that the state itself is pretty impressive, and even the whole setup is, well, that sounds pretty chaos if you want to upend the entire social order here.
It's an interesting one, but it's just like okay, that would be interesting to try and modernize the weirdness of Warhammer, and probably would go down poorly with GW. They'd accept the old stuff because it was at least hey, that was printed in the 80s. But new stuff, like if you're trying to stick in, I don't know, an M&M reference in there, Z and Z, or Dwarf Z and Z is here to throw down with his street rivals. I'm like, okay, probably not a goer. So but an interesting little kind of, because I remember looking at it going, trying to figure out what the reference was for some of this stuff. Going, I know this is a joke. I don't know what it is yet. I will figure it out when I do a bit of thought. But I expanded some of these when I was running them because the players got into some plot hooks from the Middenheim book, which is kind of an accessory source book to this. There's kind of like 3 source books.
Do have to be a little bit careful with that, though, because I did find certainly with some of the street gangs and with the rat catchers and stuff that there's maybe not straight up contradictions, but they don't really align. So
no, not perfectly.
You'd have to be careful when you do that. It's possible, like you can do it, and absolutely it's good, just even if somebody's looking for, like I used it when the party were going around looking for, well, is there a bookseller? Yeah, there is, now partially that was down to the Middenheim, they were playing on Foundry, and the Middenheim book was, the Middenheim source book was released on Foundry before Power Behind the Throne was, so that was partially me being lazy, was going, hey, here's a city map. And, if you give people a city map with a whole bunch of place names on it, then they're going to want to click on those place names. But it can also add to like a real feeling that this is a kind of a living city with a lot of places, because they've done with the Middenheim book, they've done what they've done with previous source books, like with the Guide to Ubersreich that was in the players the starter set, and the book for Altdorf, where every place has a couple of plot hooks on it as well.
Yeah. I will say I thought the most effective of the side events were the contests which you take part in, the archery tournament and the challenges to Dieter. And some of the other bits and pieces where you can actually go and, let's have a go so we can win this.
And there's a lot of fan-made maps online, but that was one thing I did find to be a bit of a weakness in that. Or maybe it's also because I got a fairly martial group, but people in general were interested in taking part in the contest against the champion, the archery, and they had to go along to the ice skating and all that kind of stuff, which is in the Square of Marshals. There's no map for the Square of Marshals.
No.
Now, I went online, there's a good community, people had done up a map, and it's a square. If you're running on your own, there's plenty of resources out there that will give you a map of a square, or even if you're like our fellows Mick, who likes to do all of his own terrain, I'm sure he has a fountain and a few archery butts he could throw out there. But a slight downside, but it's a densely packed book. I can understand why they cut some stuff out. They probably had a map in there at some point and then cut it for trimming the book down.
There's a lot of art in this book as well. This one wasn't cheap to produce because every one of the major NPCs gets a kind of upper body portrait. And I would say a lot of money spent on art in terms of here's what the characters look like, and it's important ones to spend money on because the players are going to go, who's this guy again, and anything that makes them distinctive and at least able to recognize them a bit is important.
No one has a twirly mustache that makes them clearly look like a bad guy.
No, not at all.
Except Wallenstein. He's got a big, blank-eating grin on him.
Absolutely. But it's like, they all need the pictures, because if you don't have them and the players go, what does this person look like?
They're obviously not important. They don't have a picture.
They're obviously not important.
Yeah.
So from a metagame point of view, everyone, even like the midden marshals, apart from shootsmen, aren't that important.
Yeah.
But you still have the art for them that are around a lot, so you can talk to them.
But it's it's actually kind of nice, and there's one character that wanders around the city called the Knight Eternal, who is a total useless figurehead, and almost nobody likes him. In fact, most people will actively go out of their way to avoid him at any of the social functions because they think he's a prat.
Yeah.
He's got a portrait, and people could. I like that players could waste a lot of their time talking to him, thinking that he's important, because certainly Brunkwald thinks he's important.
Oh, yes, he does.
But people can do it now. Again, my players sussed it out pretty quickly that okay, this guy is a peacock, and he's absolutely pointless and wasting time with him. But it's still he's an amusing character.
Absolutely. So, but it is, the players are going around, they're chatting with these NPCs. Some of them are easier to meet than others. So you get to meet there's a whole crew of kind of the elves and
the champion and some of the ladies at court that will be regularly
early on.
They'll be at the event. Like some events, you need to score an invite to. And these guys are often the way you're going to score that invite. Now, other ones, the archery competition, you just rock up and say, hey, I want to do the archery contest. The champion, you just throw your name into the jar and, maybe you get drawn out. And, as a GM, you can make sure one of your players gets drawn out. I decided how many entrants there would be and then rolled it randomly whether somebody would someone would be challenged, because there's two challengers a day. I decided there'd be 10 challengers, and the numbers came up when they came up, and both my players who wanted to fight the champion fought the champion.
Yep.
Decent stats as well. I find in general they didn't have to do much tweaking. I did still, polish a few people's stats here and there, but by and large, I thought it was fairly on par with the level of XP that the party would have at this point. Whereas that has been a bit of a letdown with previous books where you come into it and, okay, well, this guy is going to get killed on the second round.
Yeah, definitely. It's... Okay, so it is a very challenging one to run because it's kind of a complete... The players can go anywhere and look at anything. So you kind of need to have the entire adventure prepped.
Yep. I think I've read this book cover to cover probably 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
And then each time, before a session, I would read up on what I thought the players were going to do, which might not necessarily be what they're going to do, but what I thought they were going to do. And, my group are fairly okay with going, okay, just pause here, give me a sec, let me get up to speed. If they take an unexpected turn, it's actually formatted pretty well that, okay, well, they're going to go to this place I didn't think they were going to go. These 2 NPCs are here. I'll just read these 4 pages for these NPCs and then dig out the 1 page for the event. Cool, ready to go. So it's... it's formatted to help you out like that.
Yeah, no, it's well put together with regards to running it. There are things I would have expanded a bit more because whenever you run it, you figure out very quickly, I should have done this differently, or I should have done more of this as a GM. And having some more stuff fleshed out, because some of the events are just, you go there, the people are there if you want to talk to them, that's it. Nothing's actually happening. Or rather, what's happening is what's on the tin. There's a jousting competition. No one important is here.
Yeah.
There's tons of nobles, but no one important is here. So you could but players are like, oh, it's hard to get in there. I bet there's something going on. I'm like, it really isn't. So your players can be kind of punching in the dark a little bit.
Yeah.
Trying to figure stuff out. And they're worried if they miss something, they miss it.
Yeah.
And they're right.
Yeah.
If you miss some events, you miss them.
Especially because there are some people like the Chancellor and some of the Law Lords who only turn up to a handful of events.
Yeah.
Now, that can also be, and it is actually cleverly done enough that they start to turn up towards the end of the week because they have very definite, like the Chancellor's being blackmailed. And the 2 Law Lords there are 2 of them, one of them is being blackmailed as well, and the other 2 are in on the conspiracy.
Yeah.
So, if players get access to them early and figure it, then the entire thing unravels. And it's formatted that it naturally comes to a big kind of showdown and conclusion at the end of the festival. You could roll with it if they figure things out early. But it's kind of it's designed so the entire thing is happening over the entire course of the festival, and then it comes to a big climax at the end.
that's one of the bits that's slightly awkward on it, and the players can try and trigger the end of it a bit early.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, because it's a set piece, I mean, you can be flexible about it, but yeah, there's a little... Okay, so a couple of things about the climax of the adventure. Once you figure out what's going on, you figure out that a bunch of the players in the city, the power behind the throne people, have been manipulated into supporting these taxes. And the players are kind of stuck trying to figure out who it is. And they can kind of narrow it down to a couple of possibilities through looking around who's got influenced. Because one or two names keep coming up as kind of being tangentially involved. And Wasmeyer's name comes up a few times. He comes up with Sparsum. He gave Sparsum the drugs. Started Sparsum on the drugs, and he loudly votes. He basically he privately voices objection to the taxes.
Yeah. The law lords vote in the same way that if anyone's seen The Death of Stalin, where it's like, and it's unanimous. Yeah, like people look around the room and see it's going to be 6 out of 8. So suddenly it's 8 out of 8. So the law lords say they always vote equally. So it's 3 of the 3. But so Wasmir is saying to everybody, "Oh no, I was against those taxes," when really he's the mastermind.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's a wizard.
Yeah.
And
but he's licensed.
Mention that he is licensed. Oh no, he's licensed.
Yeah.
And I didn't mention that because I said I knew the player. That made the players suspicious. And then someone asked and said, "Oh yeah, he's a wizard." And I said, "Why didn't you bring that up beforehand?" Like, I didn't ask.
Why would it matter? He's a licensed wizard. It doesn't matter. Yeah. What color robes does he wear? He doesn't wear any colored robes. He doesn't want people in daily life going, "He's a wizard. He's conning me out of my money."
One of the hints they got about that was that his agent has a magic sword, and I had it as he made the sword because I made a metal wizard. Sure. This doesn't mention what wind he is, but he would have to be a wind to be. So I said, "Oh yeah, he's got a metal sword." And the other reason for him being a metal wizard was all the fighters of my players wear a ton of armor. And I said, "You know what? For this fight, that is not going to be an advantage."
Yeah, it's just going to cut straight through it.
You've got your heavy steel shield. That's 3 armor, and you've got your Gromwell plate plus mail plus the leather. So let's just add. That's 3, 5, 8. That's 8 extra damage in every one of those hits there.
Yep.
That put manners on some people.
It would. Yeah.
That puts a few manners on some people walking around in heavy armor the whole time and basically bullying anyone who tries to bring it up with them, which was fun.
That or a quick dip in a lake.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But he's an interesting bad guy because I kind of kept him. The players were kind of thought that Wallenstein was behind him.
I think my group for a while did as well. Yeah.
Because he's the obvious one.
Yeah,
right?
he is actually a Wittgenstein, the evil family from the last book. He is the last survivor of that house who's the letter from him has led you to Middenheim in the first place, but he's nothing to do with it.
No, not at all.
And in fact, you even have the option and a suggestion in the book that it's an option that he will turncoat. He will straight up work with them. To thwart the Purple Hand because he's in a rival cult to Jade Scepter. That's an option. I don't know. My players wouldn't condone any of this working with chaos business. But if you got a party who are more morally scrupulous, then less moral, maybe they would get in for that kind of thing.
Well, yeah. So the whole thing. You kind of have to massage because I had the players try to short circuit some stuff to find out because they're trying to figure it out. They don't know that when the thing is meant to finish. So I'm like, okay, well, because one of the ways they tripped me up a little bit was they came up with a good plan. When they raid the lair of the pawns, where basically Wasmar has the girl hostage, they came up with, hang on, there's these pigeons here.
Yeah.
And they go, what if we follow the pigeons? And I said, well, it's basically very difficult. And they go, oh. Let's go up to the top of the Church of Ulrich. So one of the players is an inner circle member of the Knights of the White Wolf. So he gets them in there, they go to the top of the thing and they release the pigeons. And there they go. And I was like, that's a very good plan. How do I mess with that? And I go, okay. Well, basically I made it so that the pigeons fly down into the city and they could narrow it down to one of two, basically they fly to one part of the city. And they asked me where the different law lords' houses were, and I put two of them in the same section. I put Ehrlich and Wassmeyer's home in the same part of the city. So like, okay, I think it's one of them. And then they basically broke in, one of the characters turned invisible and broke into Ehrlich's house. And he's waiting there, he's basically sitting in his room with a pistol. Because they banged on the door and he's like, oh god, and he's got a pistol waiting. And the person turns visible and walks into the room. And Ehrlich hears the door open, turns around and fires at the door. Because he's scared. And he's like, oh my god, he's in on it. And he runs away. And then Ehrlich runs outside and calls for the guard. And the guard show up and they're like, yeah, he's got guards crawling all outside the house. He's clearly in it. I'm like, or you broke into a guy's house, he freaked out because he's really paranoid at the moment. He shoots at the door and then calls the cops. It's like, someone tried to break into my house. So yeah, I mean, it is an interesting one from that point of view because the players can kind of try and get to the ending a bit faster, and you might have to play a little bit of this is sort of a set piece that happens at the end, and the book kind of controls when that happens by not letting you retrieve Ehrlich's daughter until a later point.
Well, the trick I had with that was. Because my party did a similar kind of thing where they just barged into her. They were like, we haven't seen this Ehrlich guy, let's just barge into his house. Which obviously then would kick off certain events. So my knack of my trick for allowing a lot more time to pass is, that the only map that you have is from when the inn was attacked, and okay, they've pieced together that these Skaven kidnapped the girl as well. Okay, well the only way you can navigate it is through the Undercity, and you are not navigating your way through there. You're gonna have to get help from the dwarves. They have, iron breakers that go there and they're patrolling, and well, they're just back from patrol. They're tuckered out. They're not going until tomorrow night. Lets the day pass. And then they go through it, but it's a long perilous climb through the sewers and the Undercity, so that's going to take another half a day. And then they go and they recover the pawn, and you're nearly at the end of the festival. Yes. So you can kind of artificially sometimes. Yeah,
you have to do that a bit though to play with it, make sure it happens because there's a whole set piece. The fireworks are going off and everything. It's like the city's crowded to get across. The one for me was they actually took over a Purple Hand safe house.
Yeah.
And we're using that as their base of operations. So we're not going to stay in that inn. People might see fire. I'm like, okay, cool. And so then they go past the inn, and it's on fire, and they're like, "Why is the inn on fire?" Because the Skaven and kidnapped everyone out of it. And they had to go down to the sewers to rescue all of the NPCs who got kidnapped from the inn and taken down by the Skaven. Yeah. And so that was kind of that at least spread some time out a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, should we deal with that? They're like, we really should deal with that. That seems like our bad.
I mean, that is one thing that the companion can be pretty good for as well. Because we haven't really talked about the companion book. The companion book, as well as having two whole separate adventures at the back of it, does have a whole pile of events that can happen inside the city. The only one I really used was the garden party, because the garden party is barely described in the main book itself.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a very good way. Because almost all of the key NPCs are there. So if there's anybody who they haven't made contact with or doesn't even realize that they might be a kind of a key NPC, they're going to be there. And it gives a kind of a clear time frame of what they're going to be doing, and there's even little hints that come around. When people can take a walk through the hedge maze, and players have the option of hiding in the hedge maze and overhearing the conversation. Now, as it happens, some of the conversation is for plot hooks that have already been revealed and possibly even dealt with by the players, but it's still there. And you can also get like the R. Ulrich, the Wolf Pope, is being blackmailed, and I don't think players really had any big suspicion up until the garden party that was happening, but this was really what cemented it, because there's they had bought a rumor from an information broker, so they knew what was going on, but this is where they twigged who it was with, and that really kind of tied that thread together. So that one is I thought was definitely a good addition. Quite a lot of text with it, so I can really understand why they cut it from the main book, but it really pads out the adventure nicely if you want to.
And it gets people a bunch of extra information. It's another opportunity to meet some people, and you get to see the graph.
Yeah.
Which only one character might have seen otherwise, because they might have become champion. The other interesting one is I ran the Wine of Madness.
Yeah, I chose not to go with that because it seemed like there was a lot.
The reason I ran it was that they were interested in Wittgenstein early, and I wanted to give them a plot of what is he up to.
Sure, yeah.
And this is what he was up to. And what was kind of funny about it was they figured out, okay, we think he's putting something in the wine. And he's supplying wine to the entire city. All right. And they're like, let's bust in there and take him. And they're like, he's not there. And they're like, Because what happens is he gets kidnapped by the Skaven towards the end of the thing, so he vanishes. But his plan's still going ahead, so they're waiting for him to re-emerge, but he's not there. So the cult carries out the plan, and they're so all the wine's in the building. I'm like, yes, it was. And they were like, well, I said, you guys stopped watching that 3 days ago. Let's go check. It's empty now. Where's the wine? And I go, there's a big giant list of every inn the city it's been delivered to. And they're like, huh. I said, yeah, maybe you could have dealt with this a bit earlier, but this is great because this is going to take you a day to fix.
Yep.
So they spend the day running around the city, taking wine off people and going, no, you can't, it's poisoned. You know, which was fun from that point of view. It also, the companion includes a bunch of details about the Jade Serpent cult.
Jade Scepter, yeah.
Or Jade Scepter, yeah, which
is Wittgenstein's cult.
It's Wittgenstein's cult, but it's also the late Graf's wife's cult.
Yep.
Which people kind of sort of figure out. Ooh,
it's a dangling thread that's just kind of left there that you could do plenty with if you wanted. But the fact that the wife is gone is. But I mean, how deep does the rock go? You know, obviously Wittgenstein got in this position, but how many other people did?
Yeah, I will say that some of the spells that the Slaanesh has access to, be careful about using them.
Yeah, you derailing with mutations and
Chaos Spawn, for example. If someone actually successfully casts it on one of your players, and he goes, "Yeah, I got 5 overcast in that, so I need you to roll on the physical or mental corruption table 5 times."
Yeah, you're basically retired.
You're kind of retired, and what do? You basically have to tell the player first so they can spend a fate point to have that attack miss them. I had a player hit by it, and I said, okay, the mutations wear off basically 1 per day.
Sure. It's just to hide out.
Yeah, well, the physical one went away first, and then the mental ones, he roleplayed through them.
Yeah.
So that was, I was like, okay, that's all right, because it's a bit too heavy otherwise in terms of kind of ruining you. And like Fleshy Curse is similar in that it's kind of implied to be permanent. Well, no, they state it's permanent. I'm like, yeah, again, this is this is character ruining. You know, there's a couple like that which are just be careful about using them because they'll just they'll ruin your day. Absolutely ruin your day.
Yep.
But yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Some Cult Ulrich stuff, which is also nice.
That's quite nice. More detail on the Duchy of Middenheim as well, just if you are continuing up with the trading stuff. Obviously, your barge is either burnt down or left parked up on the Reich, but it doesn't mean there's not some kind of trading going on. The miracles are very kind of on point for Ulrich as well. There's a lot of kind of extra damage, extra points on crits and ignoring the cold or inflicting cold on people. So it definitely fits in quite well with Ulrich's whole deal as the god of winter and war. There's some extra PCs there as well. So NPCs, just if you want to throw in, there's a couple of clerks, information broker, and there's even a spy to help you out as well. If your PCs are particularly floundering, there's a friendly NPC who'll be working for the Graf's son, not the Baron. I guess he's his illegitimate son, so he's not in line for the throne, but he is definitely a power broker who will come in later on. He's not in this adventure, but he does have an agent working on his behalf in the city who can turn up and be like, hey, you're a bit stuck here, here's a clue.
Yeah, I will say I think the Brunhilde Claglich section, which details Wasmar's primary agent that you're actually tracking, is, I'd say, nearly the most important bit in the book to read carefully, because it explains what all of her secret identities look like
and what they were up to.
Yeah,
and who knows about them.
Yeah, so if a player asks, "Oh, what does she look like?"
Yeah,
you've got a description for what she looked like to that PC or that NPC. So it's kind of cool because they sort of figured it out eventually and went, oh wow, right, you know. And they bring some old NPCs from previous parts of the campaign back.
What's that gambler from the first from the carriage of the first book been up to?
Oh, Philip Descartes. Yeah. And I had them run into Dr. Malthusius, who was desperately in need of some new attractions.
They keep breaking out and getting killed and stuff.
That was basically his problem. He's like, I need something, man. I need something. And they're like, can you get me a Skaven? And they're like, no. They'll kill you. So yeah, I think you could have some fun if you had the basically rough nights and hard days. You could bring your man back as the nobleman with his his paramour again.
Oh, the Catholics, is it?
Yeah. That's just good stuff. There's also like an adventure, the ritual, for if you want some more Skaven stuff.
Yeah. I tried to de-emphasize the Skaven bit because the next book is kind of heavily based on the Skaven. So I saw that and was like, no, I don't want them to. And I was even at pains to explain to the players when. Okay, the Skaven have kidnapped the Law Lord's Erlich's niece, but kind of going, look, guys, because I know my players can grab onto a hook and just keep going after it, and I was like, look, guys, this is next book's stuff. Yeah. This person can kidnap and follow up on this lead, absolutely cool, but don't dig deeper on the Ratman stuff because it's not. It would detract from the entire game itself. And maybe they could do a bit of it and they keep finding dead ends or something, but that's one perilous thing I think we'd introduce more Ratman stuff.
Yeah. And if you want to run for the further misadventures of the Gravelord, you can run the Flying Death Skulls on the way to Midnight.
Nice picture of what a wagon looks like in the world of Warhammer.
Absolutely, which I did, and the players are now like, this idiot again, and he's going to show up again for the last book,
sure.
Which I kind of like. They just keep showing up and
annoying people. There's a nice variant NPC in there as well, variant bad guy, which is the Changeling. Yes. One of the Law Lords is in fact a doppelganger, but if you want, you can replace him with a Changeling, and you can decide whether Wasmar is using him, whether Wasmar is using him or the Changeling is using Wasmar. It's up to you which way you want to go, but it certainly ups the challenge. The Changeling itself isn't that tough a combatant. Now you got to obviously beef up the Changeling as much as you wanted, but beef up the doppelganger as much as you wanted. But I thought the Changeling was a nice spin, nice ability. Everybody takes a -20 when they're looking at it.
Yeah, and that doppelganger needs to be buffed up otherwise, because it's a nothing fight.
Yeah.
If you don't do something with it, especially if you got kind of if you got a player, for example, who's good enough to beat Dieter, he's going to flatten the doppelganger.
Yeah, definitely.
Though I had a really funny idea for one, I considered doing it, which was you could go in, break in, and basically you see the Graf strangling the Graf to death, and what do the players do? Well, they hop both of them. It's the Graf who's been beating up the doppelganger. You think they can kill me?
Yeah, like I said, the Graf isn't a pussycat. Like he's got reasonably any of the kind of reasonably big NPCs in this have fairly good stats. So the Graf could probably go toe to toe with most players.
Oh, absolutely! I just thought that was a funny idea. It's like, he's killing the Graf. Get him! The doppelganger's crawling away.
I didn't succeed, but maybe they'll succeed for me.
It's an interesting one because it doesn't really explain why the graph is being replaced with the doppelganger. Couldn't they just do this anyway?
Yeah.
But my fop to the players was that Wassmeyer has figured out they've sussed out his plan.
Yeah.
And this is his backup, is to just replace the graph. It's not as good as just manipulating the graph and doing what he wants, but we'll just do this right now. But because his plan is actually to replace the graph then afterwards. But the question is, why doesn't he just replace the graph and then do it? Because he plans to kill the graph or dispose of the graph very quickly after that. So it's kind of I put it in as a stopgap of, you've disrupted his plan, so he moves to the emergency plan, which is replace your man with the doppelganger.
I thought that the plan was a little convoluted, but I stuck with it anyway.
Needlessly, it's brilliant the way it's needlessly complex.
I was very wary about the big set piece ending, but it ended up working out okay.
Yes,
it's I don't know, reading it and obviously having read it several times, it seemed very like it basically all plays down to the set piece with the closing of the festival with the fireworks all going off, and then he ends up on the causeway into the city, and gets his last gap. He's stabbed and falls off the Vollschlag, and then never to be seen again. And I thought it was very. I guess I remember playing a Pathfinder Society game where it used the words "make it cinematic," and I was like, ugh, vomit.
Originally, he never comes back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great missed opportunities.
So you're like, you go to pains to make sure he gets away, and then he never shows up again. So you're like, what was the point in that? Yeah.
I let the players get him. He falls off, and I'm like, oh, he's totally dead.
Yeah.
And they're like, is he? And I said, you can go look for a body. You don't find anything, but it's a big forest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like they got him. He falls off the edge, and they're like, oh, and they go fate point, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, look, you guys would get exactly the same opportunity if you spent one like that. You'd be like, oh, he's definitely dead, and he's got more ways to get away than they would. He can just fly.
If he's done deals with dark powers, a rift opens and pulls him through, and then he comes back all gnarly and scarred or something because or missing an eye because they exacted a price.
I like how he shows up basically like wearing the same clothes, but they're all ragged, and he's got hay sticking out of them, and he's lost a bunch of weight, and he's looking very annoyed. Like, this looks like a guy who has not had a good time.
He's used to soft living, and his living ain't been soft.
Yeah, I think that's good. The player's like, yeah, get that guy. It's a very good adventure. It's very challenging to run.
Yeah.
It used to be considered the most difficult of them to run. I think Empire in Ruins is harder.
Having read it, I think there's going to be a lot of similar levels of homework and stuff.
Yeah, and there's so much traveling because it's nearly a little travelogue of the Empire going around and kind of. So there's a lot of kind of going, okay, expository. This is what this place is like, or you do the talking, but it's a challenge to run. And after you've run it, you immediately have ideas about how to run it better, which is a good thing.
Well, the only thing
it's not a linear adventure at all. It's go where you go. And do you brush through the stuff quicker? Just go, guys, there's nothing here, move on.
Well, because
the travel expand it a bit.
The travel can often be important. Like the travel from certainly in Power Behind the Throne, the travel from Altdorf up to Middenheim is really just to drill home to you how much harm this schism and the rift, and that the Empire is about to fall apart. That there's pogroms going on, and the divide between Sigmarites and followers of Ulrich. Is kicking off in spots, and that there's various, that maybe Middenheim and some of the other northern regions will break away from the Empire. That different regions that may once have had their own elector counts will break off and form their own kingdoms that want to become independent. And like the whole Empire is about to crumble, and it's really your chance to drive that home.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a very good adventure. I think looking at it a bit like a murder mystery is probably the right way to get yourself in the headspace for it, where you're kind of, it's all about talking to characters and kind of figuring out what their motivations are and what they've been up to, and picking up the bits where people are lying and going, that's not true. These people are saying this, but it's not true. And occasionally kind of being a bit awkward and being very carefully awkward and saying, hello, Mr. R. Ulrich, I think you've got a problem. Let's have a word, you know?
Let's have a discreet word with the battle pope who could rip your head off and spit down your throat.
Absolutely. but if you fix a problem for him,
yeah.
The battle pope's a reasonable guy. Not really, but you can say he's a reasonable guy. So it's an interesting adventure. It's a challenging adventure to run, particularly for a GM who doesn't have a lot of experience. There's occasional bits you need to, not really big glaring ones, but occasionally the players will want to do something awkward. Because that's what they're trying to figure out what's going on, because you don't get a lot of guidance. It's not like a dungeon where it's like, okay, well, let's do the rooms, you know? It's instead, okay, who do we kill? And like, you don't know yet.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, how do you just straight up tell your players you think you've won this person over?
Yeah.
Or do you keep it a bit more vague? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think letting them know they've won someone over is fair.
I think that works best.
It gives a sense of progress.
I'd even debated at one, there is a map in the book which shows you kind of the sphere of influence around the around the graph. I'd even debated, blanking out the influence scores, and at a certain point, once they knew all the big players, like blanking out the spoilery information, blanking out the scores so they didn't know how much players were, and then gradually revealing that information that they get to know that the princess is actually her opinion means a lot. The midden marshals, not much. Collectively, they might be worth 1 point, whereas the princess is worth 3 points. But I couldn't think of a way to present that information in a way that would really work.
The only way I thought of doing it is having one of the NPCs draw it out for them. Like Natasha go, this is what it looks like, guys.
Yeah.
Let me draw you a map. This is how everyone thinks.
Yeah. That could work.
And yeah, but so it is one where you kind of, at some point you need to go, let the players figure out most of it. And if they're going very wrong, you got to go, okay, guys, this is how it actually works.
And I think
Natasha is the one to explain that, really.
She knows the court, and she is totally mercenary about it. I mean, if you just gotta do something. She won't do it out of the goodness of her heart, but if you've done a favor for her, or you're willing to do a favor for her, or I don't know, give her a pile of money or whatever, she would absolutely do the influence for you. And I think there are other NPCs who will steer people in the right direction. And once they have them on side, don't be afraid to use those NPCs to push people in the right way.
The one NPC they didn't include art for that I thought they should include art for is the other informant, because if you go to Half Nose, he's the criminal guy, and he goes, no, you want noble stuff, you talk to this George or something, talk to him. And there's no art for him. I was like, okay, well, I'll go get some art from him. It's not a big problem, but I did note that, like, he explicitly goes, oh, I won't talk about this. The other guy does that. And that's grand and all, but you're a little like, where's his art then?
Yeah. Why make that divide if you're just going to then go and not give him the stuff? I guess, for me, I think it was, I mean, people didn't seem to dig it, and I think there's already enough kind of sources for quarterly stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want more kind of underhanded stuff, well, the Half Nose is where you're getting your leads.
Yeah. A very influential adventure, really. There's not a lot of adventures like this. But you can definitely see its influence in the one or two that do, hey, there's a bunch of stuff going on, go meet NPCs, kind of, again, quite, for all the thing of, like these adventures are very railroady, and there's parts of them that are, but there's a huge amount you do what you want in this one. You talk to, you make, forge relations with them.
Really, the only thing that was railroady is the final showdown, that's it. Everything else is just totally do what you want. Okay, yes, this is the time to events, but you don't even have to go to all those events.
No, you don't.
It's going to be a lot more difficult for you to encounter a lot of the NPCs unless you go to the events.
Yeah, it's very freeform, and I think it is sort of, you think of it as sort of a kind of murder mystery.
Yeah.
And you're effectively trying to prevent the grass murder. You just don't know it until the very end.
The only thing that I think I kind of glossed over, which I think maybe made the rush to the palace and then the rush to the bad guy's house and then the rush after him a little bit harder to just kind of pull out, is I largely kind of glossed over travel times, people just kind of got from A to B just because I was started doing it, and then after a while it was just a bit of a headache to go, and it was just like, if you leave it a bit early, you'll make that event, or if you leave an hour between events, it's fine, whatever.
The game is a bit crunchy at some parts, but there's very little satisfying way to do travel times. Like, there's not really much. It's just like, okay, I mean, it's the kind of thing that...
I mean, there is a city map you could do. You could just measure it and say to get, to move 5 centimeters on the maps, it takes X amount of time at this, depending on whether it's busy or not. And then you can just add 10% to travel times, or 20%, or 50%, or 100%. But I didn't think it was worth it for the just that payoff, which I guess might make it a little bit more difficult at the end if you're going, suddenly it's thronged and nobody can get anywhere.
Yes. It's this thing of, I didn't think it was terribly interesting gameplay-wise. That's my big mechanics issue. If it wasn't, it's not interesting. It's like, oh, you've got to do this. And like, okay.
It's the drive check to get from A to B when you're not in a car chase.
I get why you want to put pressure on them and kind of a little bit of sleight of hand of, ooh, look, it's tense.
Yeah.
It's ratchet the tension up. I get it. But
if you think there's a pull off, you can absolutely do it. But I just didn't think it was worth the headache, so I just kind of glossed over it,
It's not terribly interesting gameplay. It's kind of rolling dice to roll dice.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, is this actually going to change anything? Like, like the problem is you still arrive just as the graph is choking the game.
Yeah.
It's not like you're like, oh, you took an hour to get there, the graph's dead. You don't do that, because it's a difficult one. It's it's a little bit of kind of illusionism and oh look, ooh, tension's rising. It's like, is it though? Is it? If I go around, if I drive around the thing twice, is the whole thing going to come off? Like a brave GM could do that, but after the GM, like, oh, you guys can't finish the thing until it's the last day. Then going, oh, you took too long.
We're too late. Oh, I shouldn't have stopped for that haircut.
So but that's a bit of GM, standard GMing problems of, especially kind of open worldy. Oh, it's very free boxy, but I have a specific timeline for this thing. And you need to be very careful like you're on triggered events. This is when this happens. This is when the plan goes into motion.
Yep. All right. Any final thoughts?
I think it's a very good adventure. I think you need to read it like 3 times.
Yeah.
And ideally play it once and then decide that GM was an idiot. When I do it, I'll do it better.
I didn't have that luxury, but I did. Yeah, like I literally have read it cover to cover. I'd say at least 4 times, and then kind of the key bits as players were moving into it. I was kind of reading up on what I thought they were going to do and who they were going to encounter, and even still, there was the odd curveball when players decided to do something I didn't expect them to do, but. The book is formatted in a friendly enough way that you're able to deal with it. The information presentation is one of the best that I've seen in any books. In any book.
Yeah, it's very good from that point of view.
All right. So, that's it for our discussion. I guess not really a review. We didn't throw a score on it, but more of a discussion from the part 3 of the Enemy Within campaign, Power Behind the Throne. If you have any thoughts on it, you can hit us up on our social media. We're there on Discord, the Facebook, and of course email if you're old school. But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to the Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.